everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we are going to do a quick movie roundup here. We're going to do 3 movie reviews. I'm going to review the new Nicolas Cage film, Dream Scenario. I'm going to review the new John Woo movie, Silent Night, and I'm also going to review the newest movie from Todd Hayes, May December. So we're going to start it off with Dream Scenario, the latest film from Nicolas Cage. This one was directed by Christopher Borgilli, who also wrote this film, and he also edited it. This film is called Dream Scenario. So this film follows around Nicolas Cage's character, who's a professor at a college. You know, just a regular Joe, kind of a boring guy, a guy who could just fade into the background. You know, he's got that bad haircut, he's got a beard, you know, someone who you would just, walk by and forget about instantly. And for him, he kind of craves a little bit more of attention. He's happy in his life, but he feels like there should have been something more. He wants to write this book, but unfortunately, he hasn't been able to. He doesn't have the courage. He's very much an introvert, so he doesn't really know how to get that ball rolling. And one day, people start to tell him, including his daughter, that they're having dreams about him. He's appearing in their dreams. He's not doing anything. He's just kind of in the background, whether it be like raking leaves or just standing there. And it starts to build up a little bit of fame for him, to the point where Michael Cera's character pops up and it's like, we're going to make you even more famous than what you are right now. And Nicolas Cage's character appreciates this. But then the movie takes a very quick, dark turn, and from that point on we have a very different film. And this film really does know how to blend a bunch of different genres, whether it be drama, comedy, sci-fi, and horror. And the horror is really what surprised me. And I saw that Ari Aster was a producer on this film, and it kind of does feel like an Ari Aster film in a sense where, we're kind of moving along, these characters that seem pretty normal, and then things just get dark, and the score matches that perfectly. This film is one of the best films of 2023. The way it blends those genres is just fantastic. Now, the message of this movie, they're kind of wearing it on its sleeve, and there are a bunch of different themes throughout this movie, including cancel culture, the celebrity nature, becoming a celebrity, and what that means, while also dealing with very smaller issues like your marriage, raising your kids. So I really think that there is a lot of great messages and themes in this movie. This whole movie can be seen as one big metaphor, and I think they really nailed it. You also get some great supporting performances in this movie, including Julianne Nichols, I already said Michael Cera, and also Tim Meadows. Tim Meadows is one of those guys who mostly appears in comedies, and this movie is pretty funny as well, but he's not really that funny. The performance he's giving in this movie, I actually thought was a little bit more reserved than what we're usually seeing from Tim Meadows. And Tim Meadows, I've said it for years, he's one of the best and most underrated comedic actors we've ever had. He's also just a great actor, and I'm really glad to see him in this movie. It's not the biggest role in the world, but this movie is really Nicolas Cage's movie, and he shines. He gives one of his best performances since Pig, in my opinion. And I don't know if he'll get recognized for it, but he really plays this character perfectly. He's got to play the regular character that we're seeing. We also have to see him in a bunch of different people's dreams and what he's doing in those dreams, and I really think he nails it. Nicolas Cage is obviously one of our greatest actors. The only thing you can say is he kind of watered down his own brand by just appearing in everything. But this is one of those special Nicolas Cage movies, and it's really one that you're going to enjoy. If I had to rate Dream Scenario on a score of 1 to 10, I would give Dream Scenario a really solid 9 out of 10. And next up on the list is Silent Night, the latest film from John Woo, and this is the first film that John Woo has directed here in the United States since Paycheck in 2003, and I think it's his first film in about 6 years. This film stars Joel Kinnaman. We open up on Christmas Eve, and his son has just been murdered. And he sets out on a path of revenge. 1 year away, he wants to seek his revenge on Christmas Eve the following year, and that's all he can focus on. And this movie is telling a very straightforward revenge tale, but what really makes this movie feel different than other straightforward revenge tales is that there is no dialogue throughout this movie. Nobody speaks in this entire film. You might hear some little lines on the radio or a TV, or if people do speak, they really turn it down so you can't hear them. The whole point of this movie, it's almost experimental to the point, we obviously used to have silent films, so this wasn't something new. But this, in modern times, especially being almost a modern blockbuster, an action film like this is something that's very experimental, and I think it almost works. It's not perfect. I really thought that the cinematography in this movie for a John Woo film was honestly pretty damn ugly. I think that was the hardest part. It really felt like what a generic modern horror film looks like as far as the cinematography goes, and that was really my biggest flaw of this movie. I really thought they did a great job of telling you this story without dialogue. You really got the message across. It's actually a much sadder story than I was expecting. I thought I was going into a John Woo Christmas action film. It's a Christmas action film, but it's much, much, much darker. It's not going to send you home with a smile on your face, that's for sure. It's not that kind of movie. Obviously, you get John Woo in there, and at one point in this movie, a character grabs two pistols, and he starts shooting. I'm like, yes, we are in a John Woo movie. And really, building up to the third act, the first 2/3 of this movie, I thought they were okay. I thought they were nothing special. It was a lot slower to get to the third act. But then when we do get to the third act, and then we get into the big time, big action sequences, and we get to see John Woo do his thing and, really direct those awesome action sequences, there's just something still very special about watching somebody with either a pistol or a shotgun just mow people down like it's a video game. Still love to see that, and John Woo always has been good at catching that, whether it be in his Hong Kong films or even in his American films. Obviously, I really love Face Off. Mission Impossible 2 is alright, and I think Broken Arrow is actually one of the more underrated action films of the 1990s. I just wish that this movie just had a much better screenplay. I get what they were going for, but it just doesn't hit on every single level. Joel Kinnaman is asked to do a lot in this movie. Obviously, he's got to act without dialogue, so a lot of his emotions have to be expressed through his face, and he does a really good job at that. Everybody else in the movie does an okay job. Kid Cudi pops up in this movie, and this is probably his best performance ever, mainly because he doesn't have to speak, but he does a good enough job in this movie as well. The score is really what's moving this movie along, and the score is very, very, very well done. I just think that this movie is more flawed for its own good. It just felt like this movie could have been a lot more special. I didn't really know what kind of tone they were going for until I actually got in the theater. The trailers will make you think that this really is a straightforward revenge tale, one that might have the cheesy dialogue you expect from a movie like Die Hard, in the sense like this is what they're kind of trying to play with, is that counter programming for Christmas, not the happy-go-lucky Christmas movies, like the fun action Christmas movies like Die Hard and Lethal Weapon. And unfortunately, it's much more sadder than that, and if you're going into it expecting to have a lot of fun, you will at certain points, but for the most part, you're going to feel pretty down about this movie. And for that, it does work in the sense, especially at the very end of it, I'm not going to lie, it definitely got me emotionally. I just felt like the first 2/3 of this movie weren't as good as the final third. But you know what? You'll probably remember the ending more than you remember the rest of the film. So for that, it's still pretty good. How would I rate Silent Night on a score of 1 to 10? I would still give Silent Night a pretty solid 7 out of 10. And the last film on the list is May December, the latest film to come to us from Todd Hayes and Netflix. My favorite film from him is Far From Heaven, that came out in the early 2000s, that stars Julianne Moore, Dennis Quaid, plenty of other great actors. That movie is a masterpiece. I just rewatched it. As far as cinematography goes, Far From Heaven is one of the best shot films ever. If you haven't seen that one, I definitely recommend it. Carol's also a great film, but he has so many great films, Todd Hayes, and this feels like more of a return to Carol and Far From Heaven, because Todd Hayes does bounce around between a lot of different stories. He obviously has the themes he likes to tackle on a lot of his movies. Julianne Moore appears in most of his movies. That really is his muse, and she appears in this movie as well, along with Natalie Portman. And this movie is telling the story of Mary Kay Letourneau, I hope I'm saying her name right, back in the early 1990s, and I remember this story not when it first happened, but when she actually got rearrested and sent back to jail for what happened. So back in the early 90s, she was married, Mary Kay Letourneau. She was married, she had kids, she had a family, everything seemed right, but then she ended up having an affair with a 13-year-old boy. And that really ended up defining the rest of her life. She ended up getting pregnant, having their first kid in jail. And then when she eventually finally got out of prison 7.5 years later, after screwing up her first sentence of 3 months in jail because she ended up getting back with the kid, apparently they just were in love. And that's what this movie is going to be tackling. But she ends up getting sent back to jail. And then when she ends up getting out of jail, the two of them end up getting married. And until 2017, I believe they were married. She ended up passing away in 2020. But this movie is tackling a window in their life. Natalie Portman is going to be portraying the Mary Kay character in a film, so she wants to learn as much as she possibly can about her and like what her life was, what caused this. She's going to be interviewing not just Mary Kay and her husband and the kids. She's going to be interviewing her father, his father, a bunch of different people that were around when this actually happened. And she wants to get into the character. So for this movie, it really surprised me because I thought it was going to be a kind of a straightforward biographical film, but we're really just looking at these people at a window in time. We just hear them talking about what happened. We don't really get like any news coverage about what happened. We kind of see it on, the covers of magazines because this was a big tabloid thing. That's how I actually knew about it, because she ended up going back to jail, and I just always found it fascinating that they ended up getting married. It's a very fascinating topic. It's hard to understand because, yes, she is a child predator. Like, she ended up grooming this kid for her, but the movie is operating in the gray area completely, whether it even be from Julianne Moore's character or even the kid that she was with's character who ends up becoming her husband. Like, everybody has something dark behind them. Everybody in this movie is delivering their lines pretty cold. Honestly, I think Natalie Portman gives the best performance in this movie, and if somebody gets nominated for an Academy Award, I hope it's her. She falls into this role as the actress who will end up playing Julianne Moore, and I was really surprised at what her character ends up becoming and what she's going for in this movie. You know, she's a Hollywood actress. I did not expect them to dive into the, the actor's mentality as much as they did in this movie. I thought that it was going to be really more about Julianne Moore's character, and yes, it is, but everybody turns out great performances in this movie. It's actually kind of funny at points, which it's kind of dark, but it is kind of funny at points in this movie. The cinematography is great. Now, the score of this movie is phenomenal. Now, it's just a reworked version of The Go-Between. Apparently, they just kind of reworked it. They were using that. A lot of films, what they like to do is they'll use scores from other films just as test audio, just to see how a score would help in certain scenes before they actually have the hired composer make a score themselves. But they really liked how this score worked in the film, so they ended up reworking it and using it in the movie. And it was heavy. I mean, it would be overbearing in scenes, but it worked perfectly for the type of movie that they're trying to make here. I really do think that May December is one of the best films of 2023. I was really surprised this weekend at how much I enjoyed this movie. Just from a film standpoint, it's a very dark movie, obviously, what they're dealing with the subject matter, but Todd Hayes just knows how to make these melodramas, and I really think he got great performances from everyone. I really think Natalie Portman, though, is the standout performance, and obviously, this isn't going to be a movie for everyone. It's a very dark and, it's an uncomfortable movie. Like, what exactly happened? And it's trying to just take a peek into these people's lives and understand what caused this and how they are dealing with it from this point on. And it really does, I think, look at it in a very human way, while also being funny at points. It's a real combination of genres in this one, and I really think they did a great job. Todd Hayes is one of the most underappreciated directors we have, and you can watch this one right now on Netflix. The other two you have to go to the theaters to see, but you can watch May December on Netflix right now, and I can definitely highly recommend it. If I was going to give a score of 1 to 10 for the film May December, I would give May December a 9.5 out of 10. There's a good chance that this one makes my top 10 of 2023, but I can honestly say all three of these films are probably worth your time. Just know what you're getting into going into it. Dream Scenario is a lot of fun. That one's been on my mind since I saw it, so I definitely can recommend you see that one in theaters. I think you'll really appreciate the themes of that movie and the metaphor that movie is trying to tell. I think in modern times, that's the kind of movie that really feels like a 2023 movie tackling 2023 issues, and I think in the way that they tell it is phenomenal. Silent Night, I was a little bit let down by, and May December really knocked my socks off. I've been thinking about it ever since I saw it, so that's the one I would probably say to see the most, but I also know that May December is not going to be for everyone. And I want to also thank my channel producers, Jason Martin and John Doe Juggalo, my two channel directors, Kevin Kruger and Frank Rodriguez. If you want to join the ranks with them, just click the link in the description below. Pick a tier that is best for you. But if you can't do that, don't you guys worry about it. Just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, get out in those streets and tell your friends about us. And then we will be seeing you around.